How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Neil. How are you doing?
9 out of 10, and maybe a 10 out of 10 after this conversation.
Well, fantastic. I'm feeling great. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. And when you're not listening to Voices of PropTech, what podcasts are you listening to?
I am a podcast listener. I do like a good podcast. I've got a 3-year-old son, and so when I'm putting him to bed and I need to be in the dark so you can't see me, it's quite convenient to put a podcast on. So industry wise, I do love Brad Hargreaves' Thesis Driven. I think it's
Mm,
exceptional. He's just got a new season now. I've been listening to those. There was some excellent episodes of Clelia Peters and friends of mine who I think are
yeah.
fantastic. And the last season had some really good episodes of Marianne Martin, who I'm also a big fan of. And then I also do. There's other industry ones. I like Tangent. I like Mike Del Preto's Context. I used to listen to Nate Smoyer a lot on his TechNest podcast. And then you catch glimpses of a lot of the other industry specific ones in multifamily and what have you. But there's a lot of them now. So those that's on the industry side. On the kind of personal side, I love football, soccer as you would call it in the US, and
Mm,
I do have a little bit of a affection for these kind of nostalgic podcasts where they bring on old players from the era when I was growing up as a kid, the Premier League, and you kind of get a little bit of an inside look at how things were. And I'm not even I'm a Watford fan, but I'm not an Arsenal fan, but there's particularly good ones with the likes of Ray Parlour and people like that who used to have a kind of like a wild side to them whilst also playing at the top level. So they're hilarious. So I love those.
makes for some good story.
Yeah.
Now, if I am new to the industry, whether I'm a new property manager or I'm an up and coming founder, and I don't know who Martin is,
Mm.
who is Martin Kelly?
Sure. It's a good question. So in terms of your identity, what do you say first? So I mean, first of all, in terms of who I am, um, I I'm a husband, a father. So I've got a 3-year-old son, Liam. I married Katie, who's from Louisiana. So I've been in the US for over 15 years, which is a fair amount of time. So certainly familiar with the US. Obviously, you can probably pick it up in my accent. I am
Couldn't tell.
English, and that gets remarked upon a lot in terms of I don't sound like I'm from Brooklyn, but that's where I live.
Yeah.
But I grew up in England. My parents are actually Irish, and I had a fantastic upbringing in Hertfordshire, which
Mm,
is where Watford football comes in because they are based there. And essentially, in terms of how I came to be in the role now, which is president of Blueprint, I fell into the events world, and Blueprint is one of the most famous events in the built world. If fantastic reputation. But in terms of getting there, that's the start. Ended up with me studying law, but ended up falling into events. In when a guy who I called up who was helping people get jobs said, "Look, I've found you an interview with this CEO, and just read the Financial Times, get on a train, go to London." And I really connected with this executive, and there was a role going that was involved with producing an event which involves a lot of research, which I enjoyed, understanding new areas, complicated topics, putting together programs, and also working with solution providers and people that might benefit from exhibiting, using it for marketing purposes, and I like that side too. And that's how I ended up in the US. I've always worked. My basis was in financial events and things like infrastructure. So did a lot of conferences in both the UK and the US back
mhm.
then, actually, with things around infrastructure projects, investing in infrastructure assets when there was a move towards privatization. Worked with hedge funds, different quantitative trading conferences, and things like that. Came to the US and then worked in lots of different sectors, pharmaceutical sector, aviation sector, before leaving the events industry, working on a SaaS platform, which was matchmaking capital to alternatives, including real
Mm.
estate, but also private equity, venture capital, that was acquired by Apex. And then I had the opportunity to join Blueprint and really focus in on the built world. And so I've been at Blueprint for coming on 3 years, and it's been fantastic. And really, the wonderful aspect of my job is I get to kind of speak to people like yourself who are pushing the boundaries, trying to do things that are innovative. It's a big space. What we cover, covers construction to property management in multifamily to single family to hospitality. to retail. We really do cross the gamut of the built world, but within that, it's amazing the type of people we get to meet on a daily basis, and the idea generation and the energy and the passion of the sector. And we view our role as trying to push that industry forward, and all the industries that are within it. And it's fantastic having worked across many different sectors. It's brilliant to really be have that kind of clarity of, every day working towards furthering the built world.
I want to come back to and focus on Blueprint for quite some time, but before we do, I'm having a hard time understanding how a law student lands up running a real estate event business. So
Yeah.
how do you start at law and then end up here? How do you go from A to B?
Yeah, probably my father was a bit disappointed.
About law?
Well, the law, the law career would be a much more stable career potentially than the
Yeah.
one I chose. My sister actually she works for Norton Rose Fulbright, and so she took the safe path.
Yeah.
But in terms of you could go many different directions in terms of studying law. And in the UK, you can be a solicitor or a barrister. I would have probably preferred to have been a barrister where you're presenting in front of court. But there's a difference between presenting on contractual disputes. It's
Mm.
pretty dry. I shadowed a number of top barristers, and their lives were tough. They were kind of caged in a very small room with many leather-bound books,
Yeah.
with the sunlight coming in from the top. Just you just seeing a little glimmer of it, and then
That they
just
can only dream
pouring.
of.
They could only dream of. They're just pouring over these really dense, tough words for just
Yeah.
hours, and you really get a very little time. But in the courtroom, it's you, a judge, your counterpart, and a few other people. It's not like the glamorous kind of criminal cases. And for the criminal cases which I'd follow, I shadowed murder trials
Mm.
and amazing things, and I really was attracted to that. But you don't earn any money in that to begin with, for sure. So basically, I fell into events because I was like, well, if I've got this degree, why don't I at least go and try and get a little bit of cash so I'm not completely skint. And the truth of the matter is, if you're on trial for murder, you don't really want 21-year-old kid coming in defending you. You want somebody with a few grey hairs or bald as I am now. So I thought there's no harm to postpone it a little bit, get some cash, look a bit older, the murderers will be happy, and
Yeah.
there you go. But I ended up never going back. You had a time frame of 7 years to kind of utilize it for you to go and study again.
Oh, I was
That
gonna
la
say it's never too late, but I guess yeah, now you need to start over again.
Well, it's
It's
not too late, but you'd start from scratch.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you say that. I can't tell you why. I really don't know why. Besides the fact that I always like to communicate, I like to debate. As you know, when I was in high school, I was really young. I thought to myself that I wanted to be a lawyer. And in I think it was grade 10 or 11, probably grade 11, I did a co-op with a lawyer, and it was a criminal lawyer. And I sat just like you in some of these crazy trials and these crazy cases. I was sitting at tables and having conversations with people I had no business having those conversations with, and I was exposed to a
Yeah.
lot at a young age in that sense. But that experience, similar to yours, showed me I do not, in fact, want to be a lawyer. And I won't say necessarily it's a stable path because it's a very challenging one and rewarding in many cases too. But yeah, I think you and I opted both for some level of chaos and insanity that's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess, yeah. Within law, there's a few different directions. I guess the stable one would be more going to a large solicitors firm that has
Yeah.
kind of clients, and you kind of build your way up, and you're not really given too much responsibility early on. The barristers that are defending people, they have responsibility from the get go because they're defending people, and they're like new case every day. So that certainly is an intense life. I actually lived with a friend of mine who lived that life, and every day I'd
Mm.
be like, when he came home, so what did you do today? Who are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What case was it? Tell me all about it. And it was always incredible. It was wild. But
Yeah.
yes, I certainly enjoyed my own career.
Yeah, it's good to enjoy from afar. You get the evening entertainment and don't have to deal with all the rest of it.
Well, that's it. I mean, he was prepping for his case whilst
Yes.
watching. We were both watching The Wire at that time. I don't know if you ever watched The Wire, and he'd be reading his notes, for the next day prepping while I was just enjoying The Wire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I prefer your position in that. That's
yeah.
good. Okay, so you find your way to Blueprint. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you were thrown in the deep end to some extent, not necessarily thrown into the deep end when it comes to the event space, but when it comes into real estate, given that, Blueprint is a notable, substantial player in the real estate world, but you didn't necessarily have a lifetime worth of real estate experience leading up to that. So correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest, but if I am correct, what was that like getting thrown into the deep end of real estate and just like the learning curve must have been daunting for you?
Well, the amazing thing about the event industry and the people that kind of work, particularly in the formation and creation of events, is that there is a particular skill to researching, and like there's other industries too. Like consultants have to go into new companies, right, and they have to kind of get up to speed fairly quickly, and they have to have the ability to understand the dynamics of ecosystems. And
Mm,
so the background I had in events and the training that I had and actually, even studying law is kind of useful in terms of being able to know how to read, how to dissect information, to kind of filter out what's useful or not, or follow trends. But when I went into the event business, there's a very I actually was blessed with some managers who really taught me how to research effectively and to be able to conceptualize and pretty much just and what I found in those early days. Now this is going back and when I'm younger than I am now. I'm about to turn 40 this year, so I am showing my age there. But in terms of when you're 21 and you're just starting out, I always found it, the beginning, that is a challenge where you're talking to executives who this is their life's work, and then you're trying to understand it. You don't want to look silly, but
mm,
you also need to ask questions to kind of get you to your answers. But what was interesting through that process is one, how when people are passionate about an area, they want to talk about it, and so they were very giving with their time, even if they're a top CEO or a top investor, and that's one thing that I learned early on. So if you approach people in the right way, you can get dialed up really really quickly. And then the other aspect is that it's amazing how laser focused so many people are because they're on that treadmill of what they're trying to get to. They're
yeah.
working super hard. So there's not that many people who are truly taking a step back and looking at the whole picture. And through that, you can kind of join dots that other people can't see. And so through creating events in things that were extremely complicated, like high frequency trading, or pharmacovigilance in pharma, which people are specialists in, and having to understand that's tough. I actually find real estate is it's complicated in that there's so many different buyer profiles, the way that it's set up, particularly in terms of kind of how technology is adopted. And when you think
Hmm.
when you look at construction as well, the decision making process around certain offerings is hard to navigate, and so it is a big ecosystem with many different layers. However, it's in English, and that's awesome. Whereas some of the pharmaceutical topics, it's another
Mm,
language, and similarly high frequency trading, some of those it's really hard to follow on. But the thing is, you can still add value because again, no one's taking that broader lens. So when I came into Blueprint, it was, and again, in terms of having run events businesses where you are working on, sometimes I had 15 events going on, to just work on one event
yeah.
was to me an absolute blessing because I could really get stuck into it.
Yeah.
And look, the knowledge and the learning continues. And that's actually one of the reasons why I do enjoy listening to podcasts, because it's a little bit of an easier way to get some takeaways.
Early days of Blueprint. It sounds like, of course, that learning curve was very steep, and you're maybe newer in the space, having conversations with some of the biggest CEOs and most influential people in the space. I always love understanding, some of those, we'll call those make or break stories, those risky moves or moments that largely shaped the business you have today into what it is. I could think back just personally to some of those very early days. I mean, like year one of vendor PM, where I had been born and raised in this industry. This is all I've ever known, but by no means was I connected with any of the CEOs of the biggest real estate firms. And I would do everything and anything to get on their radar. I mean, I would literally send like videos of myself explaining why they need vendor PM and why it is going to revolutionize the way they work with vendors. And to your point, when you're passionate about something and focused on something, first of all, people see that and it's contagious. So the amount of responses I got from some of the biggest names in our industry, I was baffled. I was in shock, obviously in a positive way, but I think also because you tap into what it is they're passionate about. And so
That's
you can
right.
have those conversations. But people look at me like, who do you think you are reaching out to this person? Work. So and there's many other stories like that. So I'm curious, were there any moments, any stories like that where you took some big risks and they paid off?
Yeah, for sure. And I must also give credit to the team behind Blueprint originally. So in
Hmm.
terms of Blueprint's story, it has its origins in Miami with Lab Ventures, who held a real estate technology event there in Miami, and basically kind of came to the Connective Studio, which is run by the entrepreneur in the event space who is absolutely fantastic, Jay Weintraub, who I really looked up to, and he brought it into his kind of thinking, which is an event philosophy, and he is a very good example of somebody who has taken. He's got an event in Medicare. He's got an event in logistics. He had Blueprint. He's done an HR event. He's basically sold 5 different events in different
Wow.
sectors without. So again, in terms of kind of like working with people that have that ability to work in new sectors quite quickly and to disrupt the event industry because you're coming in with something new. I have to give credit to him, and the people who are in my team who still work with me. David Hirschman's our chief content officer, was with Jay from the beginning of Blueprint of the branding, and Vic, and also Jeff Jones. So all of those are still working with Blueprint. I came in 2 years in to basically take it to that next level with that event experience essentially, and that was a fantastic opportunity to work very closely with someone like Jay, who's a real guru in the space. But also to circle back, that's a very long-winded way of come back to your question. But your question is essentially, look, were there any kind of risks that you have to take in terms of contacting people who are senior? Now, what Blueprint had at that time, and this is kind of based off this event philosophy of someone like Jay, which he does with all of his events, is looking at an area which has yet to really surpass itself in terms of the tech adoption. And so real estate, logistics, mobility, there's all these sort of areas, these movements, you would say. And they particularly had a good exit with an insurance event, InsurTech Connect, and that was the
Hmm.
first event that Blueprint was actually co-located with. Now, so what Blueprint had when I walked into it was it had some fantastic venture relationships, some fantastic founders. Certainly had been part of Blueprint, and some amazing kind of like forward-thinking industry executives, owners, operators. But that was certainly an area where we were looking to kind of get more recognition in from over the years, and that certainly happened. So in terms of kind of like some examples there, I think that what has always worked for us is to provide an exceptional experience to people or product. So it could be product, experience, whatever you're doing. Trust that this is a valuable relationship, to kind of see how we can be helpful to people, to approach it from that standpoint. And then we've always benefited from particularly partners, people who we've brought into to be part of Blueprint, who care about what we care about. That truthfully, have been extremely helpful in enabling us to be in contact with people. So an example could be someone like we had on the vision stage, Rich Rodriguez, who built the Burj Khalifa. That's just an amazing project. That's somebody who
I was in that presentation. I
yeah,
remember
well,
that.
what a cool thing, right, to have done.
Yeah.
And I've been to Dubai. My sister, I mentioned, was a lawyer. She was there for 6 months. Got the chance to go there and see that, and it's so for someone to have been involved in building that, that's amazing. So basically, we often get introduced to these people from people who have connections because they recommend them. But it's usually creating an environment or an ecosystem
Mm.
where people want other people to be involved, and they want to be helpful to other people, and they think that they could be a quote unquote blueprint person. And for me, I have a little bit of a soft spot for people who have built things. My father was in construction. He has ran his own business, and I've seen that kind of firsthand. And it's always been interesting to be able to see something that you've built or that you've worked on. And so the some of these projects that we've had on like the vision stage have been particularly inspiring.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to other founders or executives, the likes of Spencer Rascoff, who has come to Blueprint every year and takes meetings, but is obviously just such an inspirational person in terms of having founded businesses and now at Match.com, and inspiring that journey. It's amazing to see, and it's also amazing to see people who maybe a startup in 1 year, but then progress and kind of as the industry grows, their companies grow. And that's really the bets that Blueprint is making. We are almost betting on treating companies and founders very well to begin with, hoping that they can get a really valuable experience and that they remember that as they grow and as we grow, and we try and grow with the industry. And then the other aspect is certain in terms of executives who are adopting or piloting technology, we want to be helpful to them as they do that too.
A lot to unpack there, but there's one thing in particular you said that resonated with what I'll call my perception of Blueprint was, not is, but was. And it was what you were talking about in the early days when it was you mentioned the VCs and the founders and so on. I recall, a couple of years back, when everyone said, "Oh, you go to Blueprint, go to Blueprint." Really, really good for founders that want to meet with VCs and VCs that want to meet with founders. And at the time, I think we had just done our seed or our Series A, and that was the last thing that I wanted to focus on. Right, I wanted to meet new owners, new operators, and I wanted to focus on growing the business. So, would love your comment on that. First of all, that sort of perception from a few years ago, but also. How that's evolved and what you believe Blueprint is today relative to what it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think there's a deeper debate there on, so not just if we just remove Blueprint for a second, if we just look at industries as a whole. So
Hmm.
Blueprint looks at the built world. So, some people may look at that and think the whole thing needs to just be transformed. And so from a venture perspective, I'm going to invest in companies that are going to completely disrupt and replace all of it,
Yeah.
right? So there's certain kind of investors that look at it like that, and companies that look to do that, and that's transformational, right? And that's one part of it. Then there's the other kind of component of there's this infrastructure, there's these people within those companies that want to adopt, to pilot, to kind of to be the winners as they want to change, right? So there's kind of that movement amongst the incumbents essentially to kind of keep innovating and exist. And so there's a little bit of a tension there, and in terms
Mhm.
of the built world, the setup of the venture community, kind of does have different philosophies around that. And so, as in terms of Blueprint, we don't choose one or the other. It's not our role to choose one or the others of those philosophies. Our aspect is to bring all of these ideas together in one place, and also to bring it across all these different sectors, and to get inspiration across those. And so that's what we attempt to do. And then when it comes, so in terms of the dynamics of who come, we in terms of the event philosophy of
Mhm.
of how we feel events can disrupt a space, we do over index in the beginning in terms of the journey of an event with the venture community and with founders, because truthfully, that's where the most interesting conversations are going to be
Mm.
had of how things are going to evolve, or new ideas, and just we are disruptive philosophy. But as that progresses, look, the incumbents and people adopting and using technology, we hope hear about that, and that's basically happened. And then now, we're in this life cycle of our event, going into our fifth year, where a massive part of our show is enabling owners, operators, developers, general contractors, brokerages who are piloting, playing with, operating, having to make really difficult decisions around their tech stack to come to Blueprint. And we are now actually having them come to us, where they are forming groups on their own, saying, look, we find that Blueprint is more useful than our other events, because we get access to information we don't in the other
Mm.
areas, and we get also to see there's a different vibe to it, and It's one thing I always feel slightly uncomfortable saying these type of things in terms of when I'm talking about an event that I'm obviously biased about. But this is what it is fed back to me, and so I do encourage anyone, to ask around. This is it, but this is me, part relaying what I feel is maybe an edge of Blueprint. And that's where with these other sectors you can maybe have aha moments of if I'm working in like multifamily
Yeah.
and I can speak to an executive who maybe shares my function, maybe the CTO, Chief Innovation Officer, data analytics, but they have done something different in the SFR space. It might nudge kind of an inspirational idea, and essentially the idea behind Blueprint is that we push everyone forward, and that we can bring together the best of the best, and so it's less repetition and it's more kind of it's interesting angles. And the dynamic aspect is that because we have the venture community, the founder community, people are there for different purposes. So if I'm a founder, some founders are looking to raise money from the venture
Yeah.
community. So there's that dynamic, which is they're chasing the VC money potentially, or it could be I'm a CEO and maybe the private equity firms are looking at those, or it could be that there's the aspect of doing business with an owner or an operator who might want to use your technology product. And because we have all these different dynamics, we hope that it's a different feel from your kind of used car sales lot essentially, which sometimes events can be in that category where it's pretty clear who's the buyer and who's the seller, and it's just very almost uncomfortable. Whereas we try and provide a little bit more of a quality feel. There's people there for different purposes, and it's senior level people, and you can get access to the information that you would struggle to in your more specific sector events, essentially.
That is really cool that that was intentional because from my vantage point, I had thought that Blueprint was just known in the industry for being the sort of VC founder focused event. And I thought that was sort of the niche that Blueprint carved out and other events had carved out other niches. But my experience from last Blueprint was very positive in that I had a ton of great VC experiences. I also had an overwhelming amount of incredible experiences with owners, operators, third party management companies, the people that vendor PM partners with on the client side. And so that had shifted my perspective, but it seems like it also shifted a lot of other people's perspectives that Blueprint is no longer just this VC founder focused conference or event. It is very focused on the owners, the operators, the buyers as well. And so I didn't know if that was a byproduct of just the natural sort of shift and ebbs and flows in the market. And that's what Blueprint had naturally become, or if that was actually the intentional playbook or blueprint. And it sounds like it was. You see what I did
Yeah,
there?
good. I see the pun. I see the pun.
So that's very cool. I do want to talk about something incredibly important about Blueprint. Whose idea was it to have that puppies corner there? Because that was the highlight of my trip, and there was a lot of good things that happened that week.
Yeah, I've got to give credit to the operations team from Connective who had put the puppy lounge in, and that was by far and away the best activation we've done in terms of
Yeah,
engagement. And that's the other aspect of like, look, we try and there's content, there's people we talk to, you try and bring them there, but we also want to create an experience that people enjoy and that they may be hopefully a little different, a little playful, and that's what the Puppy Lounge brought, and it was by far the most commented on experience on social media,
yeah.
and who doesn't love puppies, right?
That it was brilliant. I still have those pictures. They make me smile every day.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And of course, we should be talking about the acquisition. So Blueprint got acquired.
That's right. Yeah, which we're super excited about. So we are now, so that happened in October. So,
Right.
after the event, the Inman team, the Beringer Capital, which is the private equity firm behind Inman, who are an active player in the media space, also, Canadian, and
Mm,
they basically looked at Blueprint, and look, what is Blueprint? It's an exciting business because it's been rising every year. It's disruptive. It's
mm.
focused on the built world. If you look at Inman, their lane has been brokerages and agents, and to service that kind of community, but they are keen to explore more, and Blueprint is a channel to access the rest of the built world. So it made sense from that perspective. From our perspective, we are truly excited about it because I've explained my events background, and we've been very focused on the playbook to create a true ecosystem event that is really going to meaningfully push the built world forward. But the benefit of the experience of like an Inman is that they are a media company. They have a significant expertise around subscriptions and around
Yeah.
digital marketing. That has been great to get exposure to that and to see a team of journalists. For Blueprint, we're quite proud of our newsletter, which is the print, which we do every week.
Mm.
But the reality of the the background of that's really my colleague, great colleague David Hirschman, just putting that together himself, as one man. But when you look at a company like Inman, they have a whole team of journalists, and that's we get access to that information now, where we see that how they work. It's super fascinating, and for us to evolve as executives, and also for the event, we think that's super exciting with the partnership.
That is very cool. And when somebody goes in on your LinkedIn and looks at who you are and what you've done, or someone listens to this podcast and they understand the journey that you've been on, I think from the outside in, it's this very exciting, glamorous journey that you've been on of building this rocket ship that is blueprinting the acquisition and all the things, right? Grass is always greener, right?
Yes.
And people look at Vendor PM and they say, wow, this incredible journey, you raised all this money, grew all this growth across North America. But I don't think that, anyone truly appreciates the amount of just pain and struggle and hard work and everything, like just that insane focus grind that is required to achieve an outcome like this, and to continue that trajectory. So, because the grass is always greener, what is it that people don't necessarily understand, or people don't necessarily see about building blueprints and getting it to where it is today?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of moments that are not glamorous. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny in terms of events, when you get to that like a event, and I think people generally, in terms of kind of when they ask me what they do, if I'm at the kids' playground or whatever with my son, they'll be like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, I do this event." And how many? I'm like, "One." And
Yeah.
they're like, "Well, how many days is it?" 3 days. So you don't do anything the rest of the year. And
Exactly, right?
that's the perception, that you're just busy for these 3 days and then you can kind of chill for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas the kind of way I look at it is pretty much like almost like if you think about a boxing fight or something, the fight is won in the training camp, right? And the same
Yeah.
is the same of an event. We know you know whether an event's going to be a success or not in the build up to it, because you know what kind of components you're adding to it, or how it's tracking, and what you're building. So it's really, you're building something. And the amazing aspect of an event is that, look, real estate, you build real estate and it's around for a long time. And the thing about an event is you see it, it's physical, there's
Mhm.
an end point to it, but it gets stripped down. But there's a book I just finished reading. I think I'm going to get the title wrong now. So it's I think White City in Chicago, where it's basically that they talk about building the Chicago Expo. And
Mm.
there's all these murders happening at the same time, but you've got these people, the best collection of architects and who come together to do the best ever world show. And it's amazing to think about it in that way. You read that book, and there's this tension about kind of obviously financially how much it's going to cost, but also getting all these people to build stuff within this park. But the ambition, it was, what was amazing is these architects came together and put these ambitious plans in, and then delivered it, and then it's this Herculean of effort to make it happen. You've got to make it on time, and that's what it's like with events. The blueprint is like a circus tent, and it's not even just us. The amount of effort that the partners around Blueprint, or everybody that attends, goes to and puts that effort in to come together is truly amazing. So Blueprint is kind of like it's a catch-all phrase, but within Blueprint there's all these other elements that people's experience are totally different, because one person's experience could be you could be going to different parties, different dinners, different sessions. And it's actually why we don't do kind of so many. We actually kind of purposely enable people to like look at the categories they want to go to, but we want people to be walking around the show. And that's kind of actually an intentional thing in terms of the feeling of the show, that you're bouncing around, getting this not stagnant experience. So that's an intentional thing. But going to back to your question about kind of like the tough aspects of it, the tough aspects there's no shying away from hard work in events. And so somebody has to always kind of do the hard work to make things happen. And then in terms of making things happen, you've got to deliver it. And when you deliver it, if you don't pay attention to the details and you don't really work the details out, and that could be even thinking upfront what can make a fantastic experience, then it will not deliver that wonderfully seamless experience for the user. And that comes to the floor plan, it comes to the responding to people, throughout the year and continual building. And then also just keeping track of everything. Like when you have, 5 tracks and, 250 speakers, and we had, roundtable program, we talk about kind of owners, operators, developers. We did them in secret 2 years
Yeah.
ago with 9, and then we went to 40 last year. So that's 40 tables of 10 different people. And I wish I had. We have some tech wizards that we work with who did do a really good system for the app. But in the beginning, it's just me playing with Google Sheets, which is not very. And that's the thing. There's no sometimes, no matter if you have tech wizards around and you've got a really tech forward focus yourself, there's no getting away from just the kind of hard grunt work of just
Yeah.
making sure everything's right, and your brain actually making sure everything's on point.
Yeah, it just allows you to grunt more efficiently. I get that. What dates were Blueprint in 2024? It was October, right?
September.
September.
December. So it's always been the last few years have been September. It's pretty much we've tried to pretty much stay around the same time slot so that people kind of
Yeah.
know when it is. So and this coming year it's the 16th to the 18th. I think last year it was maybe the 17th to 19th of September. So pretty much we try and keep in the same slot.
So, did you know prior to September of 2024 that Blueprint 2024 was going to be a success?
So I was very excited about Blueprint 2024 because of some of the things we had built, and I was excited to see how they landed. You're not sure how they will land. So, for example, the roundtables going from 9 to 40, that's quite big. That could have been a
Yeah.
disaster. But instead, it was one of our best received components, and the number of different owners and operators that came through that was just amazing to see, and just people that had never experienced Blueprint before. So that was great. That was truly transformational for the event.
Hmm.
And, very senior level people, and some of those are now, I was just looking, some of them are actually speakers on this year, so they came as a roundtable participant, like Melanie French, the CEO of RR Living, or
Mm.
number of these different people, or and then a tool. These people came to join our roundtables. They weren't on our program, but we've now promoted them to speakers because they're amazing people that they came through that system. So that was fantastic. There was also the vision stage. We talked about that was completely new in terms of that's not necessarily about technology. It's about kind of building in a different way and trying things and mindset. And developers are a very significant portion of Blueprint. So that was really exciting to put that on the main stage. We had Brad Hargreaves as the MC. We had Casey Roloff is coming back as well, who built Seabrook Town, an amazing story that of like a one man, and putting his financials up on the screen for everybody to see is just different. The
Yeah.
majority of our other sessions are often panels because we try and fit so many people on. But that was really good to kind of see some slides around developments that are doing interesting things. And then the other thing was, we did the Built World Challenge, which is where we tried to, like, there's a lot of discussion around generative AI. And so we gave the opportunity to PGIM Starwood, Newberger Berman to look at how they want to review
Yeah.
these type of startups, and they kind of built this built world challenge with us, and that was great to see that and to see companies pitch for that was what they were interested in, that's what they wanted to see. That was a little bit more actionable than your kind of general conference. And so these are just a few different examples of things that we tried, and it was amazing that we really did hit kind of home runs with all of them. And there's others that I could also mention, but basically going back to kind of approaching it, is their nervousness. That it's fairly calculating that these things should be well received. So it's
Yeah.
the most nervous I've been in my career is when maybe you're missing some components that are going to be exciting. You haven't really pushed on the event, and over my career, I've certainly faced some of those. So going into Blueprint, I was much more confident than in the past in some other situations I've been in.
And don't forget the puppies. Puppies as well.
The puppies, and
Can't forget those.
Yeah, the one thing I was disappointed that we tried to get there was a really cool like robot that could build a door, and we were going to have that on the expo floor,
Huh.
and that was all queued up to go, and we'd given them the space. It was literally going to be building doors, and we were going to give these doors away. And then it just like missed its safety. There was an issue with safety just before we did that. So we just decided, not to do that. But that would have been great. So that was another thing we had in the work. So we're always trying to come up with some things that can make the experience a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
more different and interesting. Yeah,
Well, who knows? Maybe that's a good sneak peek for Blueprint 2025.
that's
Let's
it.
see.
That's it.
But okay, let's bring this to a close. I have one more question for you, Martin. You are in a very unique position in that you have a vantage point over, let's look at it between the prop tech companies, the founders that are building the technology businesses, and the buyers being the real estate companies. Whether it is a message to the founders or the real estate companies, what is something that you think is being done wrong, not understood, something that needs to be done differently? And the reason I ask that is because, just to give a little more context there, a lot of the time, founders will get together and they'll say, yeah, buyers just don't get this. They don't see that. They don't seem to grasp onto this concept, right? And maybe at times they're wrong, maybe at times they're right. And of course, there's things that buyers can and maybe should be doing differently. But the inverse is also true. There's things that founders need to be doing differently. They need to be better understanding who it is that they're selling into, the nuances that exist within this company versus that company. And the list goes on, right? But I think this is a very interesting perspective because put yourself in the shoes of a founder. It's not likely that a founder is going to go up to the C suite of one of their prospects and say, hey, what is it that I don't get that I should be doing differently? Like it's a bit of an odd or a difficult question to ask. So this is a context where I think asking that question to someone who has a really unique vantage point over both could be valuable, both to a real estate operator owner that's listening to this or to the founders listening to this. So curious where you go with that, but that's just some of the thinking behind that question.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing I've seen in even just the last couple of years, and it's kind of building up, is that there has been a different approach to looking at the tech stack, looking at adoption, and a real focus on it. The great thing is that solutions are being geared towards this and communities.
Hmm.
So I think now across lots of different areas, you have a lot more kind of gatherings, and Blueprint is a part of this, but there's deeper gatherings where there's, throughout the year, virtual communities of executives sharing experience with each other, different mastermind groups, like in the AEC industry, Shadow does these mastermind groups, or smart buildings, Nexus Labs is a good, example
Hmm.
of communities, or like a revise in multifamily. The people are coming together to kind of figure stuff out. So the good thing is that I think that kind of idea of the old idea of like, oh, this industry has a Luddite mindset is not the case, and has not really been kind of talked about in recent times, because there's so many people trying to innovate. I think the biggest issue is that it's so complicated in terms of the space. There's so many different types of structures. And so what might work for a large organization doesn't necessarily work for a small organization. So that's where the evolution, and also I've seen a proliferation of more consultants in the space, maybe to service this need, but to help draw the parallels of where something could work for you, because and to maybe elucidate and clarify some of the successful case studies
Mm.
of and that's where a lot of work is being done, I feel, and that's super important, because to tie it back to how it can work for me is I'll give you even just like a simple example of a company that we're looking at, which is kind of interesting. There's this we're always looking at how's the world going to change, and so we've talked to a founder of a company that talks about how, in terms of digital property rights, in the future, you're going to see everybody with Google glasses or that type of aspect, and so your view of the built world is going to be different to how it was. You're not just walking through buildings as they are, but you're going to see branding, logos, potentially, images, like, you
Hmm.
could activations like a dragon from Game of Thrones, I believe, has been done, where they put it on a building and it's kind of coming towards you. So as you're walking down to Times Square, what have you, you could see a dragon, and that's super. It kind of transformational how we see the world. But then when it comes to, in terms of looking at that space, property owners, for example, don't know maybe that they have digital rights, what they should be doing, what if there's an accident, if a dragon came at them and they hit a cyclist as they're walking along. These kind of things we can't even think about because we just don't know this world yet. But that's where case studies of use cases helps us digest it. You know, storytelling is extremely important in human conscious. If you think about, popular books, look at the Bible. The Bible is just a collection of stories. That's how humans retain information. So in this new world where I'm seeing dragons walking along the street, I need to understand the context of that. And to be able to do that, it's probably going to be helpful for me to read a story of someone that maybe looks and feels like me, or
Yeah,
even if they don't look and feel like me, there's maybe some parallels there. So if it's not hit my industry just yet, I can see that. And again, that's what Blueprint is. We try and uh, kind of tie that narrative behind all these amazing stories. And we do have a lot of these different case studies. But the hope we have is that when people come, they get that aha moment or something clicks and that they feel that. And it's not just where you kind of pop in for 10 minutes, but you're coming to experience where you are in the mindset of trying to understand how I can figure this out. And that's not just for owners, operators, developers. That's for founders. That's for the venture community. Everybody's trying to push themselves on.
very cool. Very cool. Well, Martin, the industry is grateful for everything you do. I'm grateful for everything that you do. You have a really, really positive, incredible impact on this industry, and I can only imagine it's just the beginning. So, big thank you, and very, very grateful for you taking the time.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of you, and I think you are, somebody followed your content of you're a hustler, someone that has really had to navigate, to find yourself where you are to get today. And look, that's the definition of what we are supporting in terms of Blueprint, the movement of people who are hustling away, making things happen and figuring it out. And I think you're the definition of that. So I'm excited to see how Vendor PM is going to continue for the future.
Amazing. Right on. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks a lot.